What was your "it seemed like a good idea at the time" story? In high school, my friend discovered that he was particularly agile at running toward a wall and kicking off of it into a backflip. He would do this all day, every day, before school, at lunch, etc. One day we were inside a classroom and the teacher had stepped out for a moment. Of course he took this opportunity to try his little trick. He didn't, however, take into account the fact that drywall might not support his weight as well as the brick and concrete walls he'd tried before. His leg ended up busting straight through the wall to the other side, into a classroom full of students taking an exam. So I wasn't actually in the class taking the exam, but to this day, I still imagine how strange and hilarious it would be to be sitting in that class then suddenly see a leg burst through the wall. Makes me smile just thinking about it. I ran across the street with my eyes closed. When I was 14. I didn't get hit by a car. However, I ran into a tree headfirst and cut my face and knee open. For all of you asking what my thought process was, it is as follows. Who am I kidding? I have no idea what I was thinking. When I was a kid I tried to ride my bike up the trunk of a tree so I could kick off and try to land it and it'd be really cool. Turns out a tree trunk is rounded and so you'll just slip off the trunk and hit your head on the tree. My brother still gives me shit about trying to ride my bike up a tree. Shooting each other with fireworks on New Year's. One landed directly in between my eyes. Luckily, it didn't go off and I wasn't injured. Me and my friend used to play a game where we threw a Swiss Army knife up in the air at nighttime and then ran away from it, with the knife part out. Playing sled dog with my newly rescued husky and a longboard on the hilly streets near my house in college. Snapped my right forearm in half and had to walk a mile back home to get a ride to the hospital. Hey, you know those degenerates who you stay out drinking with until sunrise every other day? Why don't you live with them for the last 2 years of law school? That won't cause any issues at all. Cue 2 years of abuse to my body and liver and more than a little strain between me and my friends at the time. Overall it was fun, but definitely not a good idea. So back in the day my brothers and I were shooting a bow and arrow behind our house. We had a proper backstop and a nice target on a bale of hay. After about an hour we were getting bored and one of my brothers had a stroke of genius. Let fucking light one on fire. So there we are wiring rags to arrows and soaking them in gas and shooting stuff. Didn't take long and half the yard was on fire. We'd shot pretty much every flammable thing we could burn in the yard. Since we were running short on stuff to shoot, my brother decided to launch one in a 45 degrees arc over the woods behind the house. We all watched sore laughing and giggling. When it hit the apex was when it dawned on us that this was in fact a really stupid fucking idea. All 6 of us sprinted off into the woods in the direction it'd been shot. Wasn't hard to find, it'd light an entire little meadow on fire. So we ran around stomping out fires for an hour. When we finally got the fire put out we were sitting by the creek and my oldest brother looks at us all and says, "Dad never hears a word about this." I let my 14-year-old cousin at the time try driving the family car. I was like 18 back then or 20 and I told him it's easy to drive an automatic car, basically like driving a go-kart. Told him gas was right and brakes were center. I forgot to mention that changing the gear to D will automatically have the car move. We both panicked and hit a fucking tree in front of us at probably 1 mile per hour. Luckily we were in our neighborhood by a dead end. When I was 15 my best friend and I just got new BB pistols. They were the Walther CP99. Looked identical to the real Walther CP9 with a removable magazine and no orange tip. We were playing with them in the back seat of his mom's car. They weren't loaded, we were just excited and wanted to take them out of the box. She knew we had them out and didn't think anything of it. This was the late 90s BTW. Before going back to his house she went through the drive-thru at Burger King. You know where this is going. She's ordering food with 2 large 15-year-olds holding guns and pointing them at everything. Fast forward 30 minutes, We are pulling into their driveway and his dad comes running out of the house yelling historically. One of his friends just called and said he heard on the police scanner that they were looking for his vehicle with two white males holding a female hostage at gunpoint. Few minutes later several police cars pull in the driveway, jump out with guns out making everyone get on the ground. It took some explaining on his dad's part about us being a bunch of dumb asses. 15-year-old me couldn't figure out what all the fuss was about, but 34-year-old me looks back and realizes that might be the dumbest thing I have ever done. Applying for a PhD position. Shitty pay and no free time in sight for the next 3 years, thanks to it I despise working in science like never before. In 5th grade I invented a game, where you get the swing as high and fast as you can, then at the bottom you run off it really fast. Mistimed it, landed on my head on asphalt, got a serious concussion. Edit: here's a carefully drawn and highly realistic depiction of what happened. https://i.imager.com/uiezjbg.jpg. So I was in Uganda with my family, and we see a large, about 5 feet tall, curled up leaf hanging about 8 feet off the ground. We're told that these leaves curl up and fall out the trees, and they're pretty heavy, so it can be dangerous to have it fall on you. My dad and I think want it be helpful of us to get this thing down. So, we're there whacking it with sticks, trying to get it down, to no avail, when my dad says, "Hey, climb up on that wall there, son, and jump. Grab it and then pull it down." Well, that sounds like a swell idea, Dad. So I do just that. I don't manage to get it all the way down, but as soon as I hit the ground, I get this burning sensation in my elbow. Turns out there's a hive of Ugandan mud wasps living in this specific leaf, and they do not take kindly to young men trying to tug their home down. So I'm just sprinting back to the office where the rest of my family is sheltered from the sun, and I practically have 2 elbows on one arm at this point while, as my dad described it later, an army of large, black blots give chase. I make it back inside and my arm is numb, except for the searing pain in my elbow. Thankfully, there was no further reaction, the pain lasted only around 3 hours and the swelling was down by the end of the day. That being said, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. Even worse than the time I broke my arm into 3 pieces while arm wrestling. Starting a career in television in the late 90s. I mean, the internet is cool and all, but it's still way too slow to ever compete with 200 TV channels, right? I went on a solo trip to Costa Rica when I was 26, I'm a fairly petite female. I speak no Spanish. The eco lodge I was staying at helped me arrange a guide for an all-day hike. We were flown by 4-seater plane into the jungle, a 26-hour walk to the nearest town. We landed, Jose and I hopped out, and the plane took off again, leaving me, Jose and his machete alone for the day. Thankfully it went okay, but as soon as that plane took off I realized I had made a bad choice. Snow water skiing. Me driving the snowmobile across a snowy field and my little brother skiing behind holding a tow rope. 2 broken legs. I was in the area, so I stopped at my, now ex-girlfriend's house to ask her to go to breakfast with me. Pulled up to see her at the front door and her neighbor walking out of her place while putting his shirt back on. She sees me and I just shook my head, waved and then left. Never spoke to her again. When I was a teenager, my brother, cousin, and a couple of friends decided to try to steal a Coke vending machine by tipping it over into the back of a Ford Ranger pickup and take off. We were like, shit, we'll just put it in our garage and have plenty of soda and we'll refill it. We had one of those keys for them. It was 2 in the morning and we're all wasted. This was mid-90s mind you and way out in the country. There was a little store with the machine. We backed up and my brother and I got it rocking back and forth and finally blam into the back of the truck. It lifted the front end of the truck off the ground and as soon as it landed in the bed my buddy started hauling ass with me trying to jump into the bed with the vending machine and my brother hopped on the back of the vending machine riding it like a majestic horse. but we forgot to unplug it, and for some reason it was just enough that it pulled the machine out the truck with my brother on it and crashed to the ground. We were young, dumb, and bored as hell. But it made perfect sense to me then.